Hi everyone, welcome to our short 15-minute video on Unit 710 Marketing Strategy. Now I'm going to hand you over to our tutor James, who's going to run through the assignment, gives you some starting points. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Charlotte. Okay, so here in this assignment, we have just two learning outcomes. So it is fairly straightforward in terms of number of questions asked. And as with many of the assignments on the level 7 syllabus, we have two sections really. The first then is to kind of define and lay out our key models and theories in the first learning outcome. And the second one is going to be to demonstrate understanding through developing a real world strategy around marketing in this case. So it's very much kind of primer in the first section, followed by an application in the second. I'll briefly go through the questions and highlight some things to consider to help you just to make sure that your answers are efficient and on point as much as we can get them. 1.1 then is to critically appraise theoretical frameworks and processes which inform strategic marketing. There are three rules that I like to try and encourage people to apply to their academic work to help. The first is to make definitions of any key terms. The second is to make sure we've met the command verb. And the third is the less is more principle, which is only to use as many different arguments, theories, examples as we need to do to answer the question, no more than that. Otherwise, word count becomes a thing. So applying those rules here, first of all, definitions, I'd be very tempted to put a definition of what we mean by strategic marketing. What does that actually mean in practice? How is strategic marketing different from common or garden marketing? How would you actually describe and define strategic marketing as a thing? It's a nice way as well to open up your assignment with a little bit of a definition of a key term as well, because it means that your work is now not blank page, you have something rolling, and often from the definitions actually help, you have some themes and some ideas in there that can help you with the answer as you expand out on that. The command verb is critically appraise. So this is, in this case, to select a number of different frameworks and processes. This is the less is more rule here, where you're going to select maybe 2 to 3 at most different frameworks or processes. And you're going to critically appraise each. That means to pick them apart in some detail. And it means to apply criticality in the way that you do that. So what might be good about the process or the framework, what might not be so good, what situations might they work best in, where their limitations, their best use cases, the resource implications maybe. So it really is a case of probably by paragraph picking apart various different frameworks and processes. So for example, 5 forces model, this idea of the SWOT analyses or the Ansoff growth vector matrix. These are the kind of typical things we'll be used to. Maybe things like pestle analysis for external environment stuff. So it's really kind of picking apart these ideas and making a very critical view of where you think they thrive, where you think they suffer, what their assumptions might be, where they, again, best use cases and maybe limitations might lie the most. And that's your appraisal of those frameworks, again, probably in a paragraph structure. So we've got definition of strategic marketing. You're going to critically appraise 2 to 3 different frameworks and processes. Yeah, and make sure I've applied that critical thinking throughout here for 1.1. Moving on to 1.2 then, we have to discuss the influence of an organization's strategic aims and context on a marketing strategy. So here, there's nothing, you've already defined strategic marketing. I think you might be tempted here for clarity just to lay out what kind of strategic aims and context might be so that it gives a bit of background to this question. So what examples could there be of strategic aims or context which might then influence marketing strategy downstream? So you might do a little bit of work on that just to bring out some case examples of that, some lived experience of that. The command verb here is to discuss, which is to look at this from different perspectives in particular. So you're looking at almost like a conversation with self, where you're going to try and look at the forces for, the forces against. You don't need to come up to like a conclusion for that or a judgment. You will do 1.4, but for 1.2, it's a discussion. So it's just imagining that you're looking at this from different perspectives, contrasting views, if you can bring them in. So I guess here we're looking at a few kind of high, lower order things. So it could be, does an organization's strategic aims and context actually influence marketing strategy at all? Or is something else going on? Is marketing strategy done separately from that? Is there no alignment really? Or are the challenges to alignment? What might they be? These are the kind of things you might discuss. And then you might discuss actually as well, if there is some connection there between the strategic aims and context, how does that then influence marketing strategy? To what extent does it? So there's a bit of that's the kind of discussion we're looking for in 1.2. In 1.3, we're moving on to critically review the influence of changing market environments on marketing strategy. So again, definitions wise, you don't really have anything to think about here, I don't think. Critically review now is our command verb. So again, we're looking at critical thinking, but here review. So this might be, and this is similar to 1.3 and 1.4 here. It's like look at the trends almost that review kind of thinks about the past, what's been going on, what can we learn from that going forward. So it's a nice way just to think of the time back, present, and future. Trending is quite useful here for 1.3 and actually 1.4. And now we're going to think about, well, what is that influence of change in market environments on marketing strategies? So we might think here around, again, some of the pest stuff. Can you use examples of other companies or your own lived experience potentially that show how those market environments affect and influence marketing strategy? I think a big one here might be focused on that kind of sociological stuff and political stuff. So what's the appetite in our markets for different strategies in marketing? What used to work that doesn't work is a good thing to think about here. Okay. And then in 1.4, the question is to evaluate developments in digital marketing which impact on marketing strategy. So these are looking at the tools, approaches, techniques you have in digital that might impact how we do marketing strategically again. But you're asked here to evaluate those developments. So this is where you're going to look at the pros and cons of each development, but you're going to have a judgment on each of them. So it's going to be, what do you think in the round is the positive, negative balance, perhaps, of each of those developments? And again, to apply the less is more, it would be recommendable here to think about 2 to 3 specific developments in digital marketing. So as you've got those specific ideas, those specific developments, you can talk about, obviously, AI is a great candidate here, for example. How do we use it? How has it been used? How will it be used? What's your view on that? What is the, for example, the tension between a human authentic voice now that lands with market and an artificially generated voice that might or might not land as well? What's your view on that? Do you think it's a progressive step, a negative step, or something in the middle thing? So it's a matter of really trying to interrogate each development specifically. AI might be one of those for you. But then to really dig that apart in some detail and figure out what do you think about that development overall and its impact on marketing strategy, good and bad. So that's a good kind of way to lay out our first kind of foray into this assignment here. As we move into the second learning outcome now, we're asked to know how to develop a marketing strategy. This is to do one. So this is to critically evaluate an organization's market position, opportunities for growth and innovation. I always think of Ansoff Matrix every time I see this. So critically evaluate is our command verb. And again, we're looking at that evaluation. So what's your judgment on this thing? And be critical about that. So what's the good parts about the position? What's the bad parts about the position? Try to bring a real judgment based on ideally some evidence of good and bad. The trick here is to select an organization to do this on. So a real case, either it would make sense to use the organization you're currently working within, or it could be, if you're a consultant, it could be a theoretical or real target market, a target client organization you're going to use. But it's important to bring a real case, live case study in here, so you can apply that critical evaluation to its position and its opportunities for growth and innovation. It'd be really useful to be able to cover all those things in your answer. Yeah, I don't think there's much in there that we might need to define unless you really go to town and define what a market position means. We've got the critically evaluate here as the command verb. And the less is more doesn't, again, really apply, except to know that we're going to try and figure out for a critical evaluation what you think its main opportunities for growth and innovation are. Okay, and what you think its main positioning is. So it's not a list of all the different things you can possibly think of. It's just what you think the most important drivers would be. This is like the analysis phase that we're going to do, this critically evaluating its position, opportunities for growth and innovation. It would make sense to use a tool around that, of course. We're then going to move on off the back of that analysis phase. We're going to move on to 2.2 to develop a marketing strategy to respond to existing and future stakeholder requirements. Now, you're going to use probably some of your findings in 2.1 to inform this marketing strategy, but you've also got to focus here on how that response to existing stakeholder requirements lives, and then also future requirements that might change or develop into the future as well. So yeah, it might make sense to just identify who your stakeholders are here as part of that kind of definitions phase. Develop is quite a specific command verb here, so that's the first word or two, of course, in the questions. And develop means to show from a starting position a result. So it's not enough just to drop in an existing one and then justify or explain it. You haven't shown a development there. The idea of a develop is that it begins from a starting point and then you flesh that out into something that makes sense to that starting point. The starting point is at least partially described in 2.1 potentially. And so 2.2 could build on that and then develop one out. So given that starting point, the evidence analysis you've done, what would then your proposal be for how we're going to respond to the existing and future stakeholder requirements? Okay, 2.3 then, we're going to move on to finally, this is the kind of cherry on the cake, but I guess recommend approaches to ensure an organization's approach to marketing remains effective. So this could be basically referring back to 2.2 in your marketing strategy. How are you going to make sure it lands, it sticks, and it works? Is kind of the kind of basis here of 2.3, I would say. Again, definitions wise, there's probably not anything here to worry about too much. The command verb is recommend here. So this is what you would propose, what you would think is the best way to move forward. Again, maybe based on some criticality there about what you think the most important things to catch would be. Now, it's also important for less is more to recognize the word approach is there. So it means more than one approach, but not 20. Again, I'd recommend you might want to think around 2 to 4 different approaches. And again, this really lends itself to like a paragraph structure or bullet point structure or even a table where you can identify maybe 2, 3, 4 specific different approaches that help ensure that the organization's approach to marketing remains effective. So for example, that could be, your stakeholder engagement ongoing. It could be making sure your feedback loops are really effective in customers or consumers. It could be, I don't know, survey around the place. It could be the establishment and monitoring of goals, targets, KPIs around the place as well to ensure alignment over time and to notify if things are off kilter where needs be, and how you're going to then, report and communicate us back into stakeholders again. So 2, 3, 4 different specific approaches that do the job of ensuring the organization's approach to marketing remains effective. That's thinking in the future over time. It might help as well here to consider in your answer, what might be the kind of things that could blow you off course over time? What might stop it remaining effective? And therefore, what might you do to mitigate against those specific areas and try to make sure that your particular approach is more sustainable and resilient? That's pretty much the entire assignment there. Hope that's been helpful just in laying out some of the key principles of how to answer the questions. And don't forget, of course, we have technical tutorials available for you as well. So if you come across the assignment you started to write, then we're available for you frequently and regularly, so you can come in and speak to us for any particular issues that you have.
Thank you very much, James. And yes, so as James mentioned, we hope this is helpful. And if you do have any questions, you can contact us anytime at these tutorials or on the email address cmi@impd.co.uk. We look forward to receiving your assignments soon. Thank you very much.